The business session of the Kansas City, Missouri City Council will come to order for Thursday, December 4, 2014. We do have a quorum. First item of business is the approval of the minutes for the business session of November 13, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes for November 13, 2014. Any corrections, additions, deletions, alterations, or changes? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There are no opposed. Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, Councilwoman Mayor Pro Tem Circo, is collaborative economy. And we do have someone, Ben Smith. Where are you, Ben? There. Oh, duh.
Right there.
I thought that you would be in addition to. But thank you, Ben, for being here. And Councilwoman.
Well, basically, actually, any of those watching transportation, we had a little bit of exercise in collaborative economy this morning with our whole taxi industry. And now we're talking also, we're seeing it come into our community with by way of people allowing other people to stay in their extra rooms or their condo when they're not there, and those types of things. And so understanding this economy, so we can understand as a regulatory government how we manage or not manage or react to or be accepting of that economy is, I think, important. So even understanding what a collaborative economy is probably a first step. So this is an education process for all of us. And then it will open up, I think, a lot of conversations. So, Ben?
Great. Well, thank you for allowing me to join you today. And what I was asked to do was to give you a maybe 10, 15-minute overview of the collaborative economy, what it is, what it means, what the impact can be, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges. And if I'm going through this and you have questions, feel free to interrupt me, of course. And I apologize, it's not a very slick PowerPoint. I've been on a pretty hectic travel and work schedule. But I'll get going and kind of give you some of this overview. So these are the specific questions I'm going to run through and address for you at a pretty high level. What is it? What are the driving factors behind it? Why is it happening? Where are some of the areas of impact? Some obvious, some less obvious. Questions and challenges, as I mentioned, some of them are pretty major. Some of them are already, things are evolving around them. And then where's it headed? So the first thing, what is it?
Hey, Ben, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Would you give a little bit of who you are so the rest of the council will understand
Of course.
that too?
I think I can tell that you're from someplace in western Kansas.
Guessed right. No, I've been in. I've actually lived in Lawrence, Kansas for 15 years. So
Nice guess, Mayor.
not far off. Before that, from London. So
There you
kind
go.
of, yeah. But what I do, for the last 12 years, I've worked in the media industry. For the last 7 years, run a digital agency called Social IRL, focused on how the social media and digital has impacted offline experience, consumer experience. Also, the Social Media Club, which is in Kansas City, I sit on the advisory board of that globally and have served on the board of the Social Media Club, both locally and nationally. And now in addition to that, also I'm a director of emerging media for Calhoun Creek, a marketing agency based in Lawrence. And about 2 years ago, I shifted my focus predominantly from social media to the collaborative economy, since it was a shift of how media was moving from an online to an offline interaction. So for the last couple of years, I've done that. And last year, we hosted the Resilience Summit in Kansas City. My partner in that event, Jeremiah Aoyang, is a Silicon Valley analyst who's really led the conversation. And we had at that event at Union Station attendees from 17 states and 4 continents who came to Kansas City to learn about the impact of this movement. So that's very briefly how I'm at this point today.
Thank you.
So here's what the collaborative economy is.
Missed it.
It involves 2 elements. It involves sharing and making. You often see an overlap with the maker movement and the sharing economy, how they work together. But it's an entire movement built around the sharing of human and physical resources. And what some of the things I'll get into around that, it's fascinating. It involves both businesses and individuals, and a lot of the rules are changing around it. But what it is to me is, as I just touched on, the next phase of social. In the first phase, we had media, social media, where we were sharing media, we were sharing ideas. As social media evolved, as mobile evolved, we moved into the next phase, which we're seeing unfold now, and many are comparing it to the next phase of social business. that we're evolving away from ideas and media into sharing using technology, very tangible things, money, resources, goods, space, product. So it's really an evolution in how we're using those media. The disruption that we saw with social media was significant. We were in an environment where media, where businesses were used to talking and having a one-way conversation. Social media, and of course we've seen it in politics, in local government, we've seen this conversation shift from being one-way to two-way. Social media disrupted that. The media no longer had the monopoly on the conversation. It opened it up to be a free dialogue where people could respond, where there was a forced authenticity and transparency. The disruption with the collaborative economy is now it becomes very easy to bypass corporations to get what you need. You no longer have to go to a brand to buy something. You can buy it from a neighbor. You can buy it from somebody who is a private individual on the other side of the country. You can save money by buying for less without going to the original source. That applies to both goods and services, so it's a very disruptive trend. Something to think about is it's really nothing new. We get caught up in this being something new that's impacting us. One of the values I was impressed at when I first moved to the Midwest was this gesture of neighbors, helping neighbors. It was a great thing to me. It was, I'd moved from London and was a little nervous what I was going to find in the Midwest of America. I really didn't know what to expect, but I was welcomed with open arms, and it was a great feeling of people helping you, wanting to get out of their way to help you, sharing with you. That's really what this is. It's an escalation of that with technology ramping it up. It's no longer physical neighbors. There's no boundaries on who those neighbors could be, and it's also a chance for people to take what was formerly a neighborly act and actually monetize it, make it into a form of income. So the driving factors, three key factors: societal, economic, and technology. The first ones, we've got a whole broad range of demographics. The millennial values are very much about how do we do something good? How are we doing something that's meaningful? How are we making better use of our resources? And then we're also finding a lot of retirees who are saying, I don't want to go and buy something for $50,000. What if I can buy a share of something for $5,000? Instead of buying, a car, a yacht, a retirement home, what if I share that instead? And then people who just are cash strapped, who are realizing it actually makes much more sense to have access to something without having to have ownership of something. And this conscious consumers, the sustainability issue, is a key thing. People wanting to waste less. Instead of throwing something out, they're selling it, they're recycling it, they're giving it to somebody else, they're putting it on a secondary market like eBay. So a lot of those factors. Then economic, when times are tough, if you can save money, you do. So a lot of people are finding ways to save money. They're buying goods from Etsy instead of going to a store to buy them. They're going onto sites like eBay. They're going to Kickstarter instead of going to their bank for a loan. A great opportunity to activate idle resources, something we're seeing if somebody has a second car, for example, that they never use. Now they can make money from that car instead of leaving it sitting on their driveway. If they have a home that they don't stay in all the time, if they have an empty room, they're able to convert that to income. And that supplemental income has been a key part of this. People who are maybe underemployed or unemployed have much easier access to a start earning income. So a lot of those factors. And then technology. As I mentioned, technology removes barriers. It's no longer connecting with your neighbor. Your neighbor can be anywhere on the planet. And the great thing is with this type of technology, it's local, it's real time, it's in the palm of your hand. Over 2/3 of the US own a smartphone. Smartphones happen wherever you are, whenever you are. So if you need something, you can access it rapidly. So all these factors are what are coming together to drive this shift. Areas of impact, the two things we tend to think of when we talk about this, the most obvious ones, home and car. The ride-sharing services, Airbnb, these type of services, they're the most obvious ones. But what I wanted to do is kind of think a little beyond that, just kind of highlight very quickly how far it's gone. Another obvious example that's having a great impact is this. People aren't going to banks like they used to. They're going to Lending Club for peer-to-peer financing. They're going to sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter to finance projects they could never finance before because they didn't qualify in credit. People are investing in people for economic development. And that happens both on a hyper-local level and on a national and global level. But then beyond that, the colleague I mentioned earlier, Jeremiah Aoyang, has a slide he prepared of some of the key players in the collaborative economy space. You see it's impacting money, goods, food, services, transportation, space. If you have an empty desk in your office, you can lease that space to a freelancer and make money from it. If you want to cook food and share it with somebody, you can invite a stranger into your home who can pay for a home-cooked meal instead of going to a restaurant. There's really nothing that you can't share in this movement. And as you'll see later, it's growing rapidly. These are just some of the areas that it's really impacting. Even very traditional industries, farming. We're seeing a rise now of the sharing economy, the collaborative economy in farming. Equipment is expensive. It's not always used all the time. So instead of buying something for $100,000, what if you buy a share of it for $5,000 and use it when you need to, and it's not idle the rest of the time? A huge saving for people that are trying to economize and run a small business. And now we're seeing an impact of this too, even in healthcare. An example here that Uber were actually delivering flu shots and sending people out around the community. But also the discussion is in hospitals, the same thing. Equipment is expensive. You can't always afford to buy the best, but what if you buy a share of the best and share it with other hospitals in the area? So all sorts of areas of life and business are being impacted by this. And they're creating income from idle resources. This was one of the graphs I pulled of people who are showing it's, supplementing income. There's some people that just can't get a job, or some people that have a job but are earning minimum wage, that need more money. It gives them an avenue, whether it's ride sharing, whether it's Airbnb. It gives them opportunity to earn money that they couldn't otherwise earn. So then some of the questions and challenges, and I'm racing through this pretty quickly because I know you have a busy agenda, but some of the questions and challenges that we're facing, that brands are facing, and at the event that we hosted in Kansas City, we had some of the largest brands in the US travel to join us, because no matter how large they are, they're facing the same fear. What if people stop buying from us because they can buy from another consumer? What if they share instead of buy? Huge questions. So what happens when that happens? What happens to the person selling it? What happens to the large established brand who no longer has the same retail chain? How do industries who are very established, entire industries, effectively being disrupted by technology and the consumer? The power shifts to the consumer. So how does industry react when that happens? It's a huge thing. You look at the hotel industry as one example of how they're having to react to the Airbnb and people staying in other people's homes. And then the question that you have, how do cities, how do regulators respond when the trend, the technology, the behavior outpaces policy? It's not an easy one, I know. And then another key one, trust. As these behaviors scale, as it's no longer a neighbor you know, but a neighbor you're connected with through technology, how do you scale trust? All big questions that are being addressed. And some of the big challenges that come with that. Just like social media was, when brands originally said, we're not going to join this, we're not going to talk to you, this is you over here, us over here, we'll keep it that way. It didn't work like that. They had no choice in the end. Any movement that's consumer-driven, that's driven by the public, ultimately wins. You can't stop these things happening. And with this, you've got technology like you've never had before, fueling it like there's never been possible before. So it's almost an unstoppable movement. It's not can you stop it, it's how do you deal with it. And then history repeating itself. We see it over and over again. Status quo never remains. It's always disrupted. I know when I was doing research for another project, I looked back at when they first introduced the automobile in the UK, and how they were forcing people to walk in front of the car with the red flag because this thing shouldn't be allowed on the road, and it was terrible, and it was going to end the business for the buggy rides. It didn't last. Things always disrupted. No matter how established, it gets disrupted. It's not can you stop the disruption, it's how do you disrupt yourself or how do you adapt. And then here we've got the speed of disruption is truly unique. The power of technology to connect people who are like-minded, whether it's in a political movement, whether it's in business, technology connects people who react and can come together and create a large force very, very quickly and actually have very significant impact. So then where is it headed? And again, I'll just race through this for you. Here's what we're seeing each day in the collaborative economy in terms of financial and number of transactions. It's rapidly growing. It's huge amounts of money every day. And I'll show you in just a second how much money is being invested in it. If you look at Uber, for instance, who is their primary investor? Google. There's a huge amount of money flowing into this and through this. And when we start looking at these numbers, $8.7 million per day being shared through Lending Club, peer-to-peer lending. When we start looking at the number of people involved, 13 million transactions, 100,000 transactions every single day in this economy. It's huge numbers, and it's growing rapidly. And here's the most recent chart of collaborative economy investment. And what we see when we look at this, it's far outpacing the level of investment we ever saw in the social media industry, far outpacing the amount of money invested in social media startups and technology startups. This is by far the largest amount of money we've seen invested in any new trend that's come through in recent time. The amount of money invested is huge, over $7 billion to date. And when you look at the short period of time that's happened, it's pretty substantial, and the money isn't slowing down. When you look at the number of startups that are being funded and the amount of funding in those startups, the average amount per funding round, $14 million, far outpaces what we ever saw in social media. So it's a huge movement, very, very highly funded, and very rapidly impacting a lot of industries and a lot of businesses. We're seeing brands adapt. Brand marketplaces are springing up everywhere. Even the car manufacturers like BMW, you can now rent a car from them instead of having to buy a car from them. Companies like Patagonia, that they're actually realizing they have a whole fan base, for want of a better word, who are selling their products online, who are not throwing the product away, but are selling it to other people that want it. Now they facilitate that. Brands are adapting to be part of it rather than try and fight away from it. They're learning how they can facilitate, how they become a service. The BMW, Ford examples, they no longer just sell a car, they serve the consumer by renting them a car. And collaborations, we're seeing a lot, and we see it here in Kansas City, how brands embrace disruptive startups, for instance, the Sprint Accelerator in town, how they work together, how brands work with consumers to co-create, co-design, co-share experiences. So it's very much how they work together, and we're seeing a lot of adaptation around that. We're seeing this example just this week. Citi, a huge example here. They opened up Uber rides to all 250,000 of their employees as recognized form of approved transport worldwide for their employees. It's a very mainstream adoption. We're seeing, this was literally just today this was announced, organizations like Peers. Peers have around 250,000 members who are members of would describe themselves as being members of the sharing economy. People who are sharing their home, their car, their life with others for financial gain. And what they introduced today were two things: a home sharing insurance specifically for people who use Airbnb and similar services, and a keep driving insurance for drivers who are involved in accidents and would lose income from ride sharing. They now have a replacement car in that time. So we're seeing a lot of things happening in a very short period of time. The trust issue is a very interesting one. We're seeing trust growing rapidly as a currency. In the same way we have a credit rating, it might be that we soon have a trust rating. A lot of people don't realize when they go on a car sharing ride, not only are they reviewing the driver reviews them. It's a two-way experience. Trust is becoming something that is ever more important and is becoming easier to track. At some point, who knows, we may see an API which connects all of these different things together, your Amazon profile with your Facebook profile, with your Uber review, with your Airbnb review. They may all become one currency where we're reviewed based on a trust factor, but it's changing rapidly. And then process and procedure, how these companies are moving to put in place strong background checks, criminal background checks, driver standards, the real-time reviews, liability coverages. These things are changing on a daily basis. And when I was trying to do some research into who's embraced so far, these were the cities I found or states I'd found where there's been positive action that they're saying, okay, we've got this resolved. And there's some examples there which I don't know if it'll be helpful for you in your ongoing research and dialogue, but these are some examples that I found. But the biggest situation, and this is kind of the challenge I know many cities, including Kansas City, face, is this. You have a very established network, you have very established policies, you have very established businesses, and disrupting that is not easy. You have laws, you have procedures, you have policies. How do you respond to it? And a lot of cities are very deep in the weeds of trying to find out what is the answer. And I wish I could give you an opinion on that, but I have no clue as to what the good answer is. It's evolving so rapidly, and I don't envy anybody that has to make that be part of that discussion. But it's an important one, because I really wanted to get across that this conversation isn't just about sharing a ride or a home. This is a huge impact on the economy. And for any city like Kansas City, where they're embracing technology, embracing change, embracing innovation, it's a huge opportunity to be taking leadership of something. In the same way that we're proud of things like the Sprint Accelerator, in the same way we're proud of Google Fiber. This is a conversation which people are watching across the country. When decisions are made, they're in the spotlight. So it's a great opportunity to make a decision for innovation or to make a decision that's just based, very clear, what is our discussion, what is our stand, but knowing that it's in the public eye and that people are really paying attention to this because there's a ton of money and a ton at stake, a lot of investment, a lot of business. And it really comes back to this, back where I started, the challenges. It really isn't something we can stop. It's not, do we stop it? Just like businesses couldn't stop social media. It's not how do we stop it, it's how do we respond to it? What do we do knowing that these things are going to happen? We can't stop people using their smartphones. We can't stop them using social media to connect with other people and to do business with other people. It's just not feasible to stop people. You can't change the fact that history repeats, that status quo is always disrupted. And right now we're going through a very significant phase of disruption, and you can't slow down that speed of disruption. And I know that's what's so uncomfortable for many in the decision-making process, is it changes by the day. So that's really the quick overview I wanted to give you, and I hope it helps a little bit to understand the breadth of this discussion. If you've got any questions, I can try and answer them. It's such a complex subject, I know I can't answer anything especially detailed, but if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and respond to them.
Questions from council? None? Well, I have a few. Obviously, Airbnb and ride shares, what seems to be the next great wave after the housing transportation phenomenon?
Financial is being very significant. We're seeing more and more people going to borrow money from each other to fund each other. That's a really interesting discussion. Obviously, if banks aren't getting the business, there's a significant impact in the economy from that. So that's a very interesting discussion. Beyond that, it's really difficult to say this is the next big wave because there's so many waves happening at the same time. Everything from the example of the farmer to, healthcare, everything. This is what's so complex, is there's really no business that this can't impact. Initially, there's a lot of skepticism around that, but now we're seeing it unfold in front of us.
And with the regulatory schemes, I've seen some cities who started off with a very open approach and then retracted. That's happened in a number of places. I think Uber just lost its ability to operate in, what was it, Washington or not Washington?
In Nevada.
Nevada?
Yeah.
And so there has to be things worked out there. And I recognize that, it's an evolving industry or economy. But what do you see as the major issue between cities and the collaborative economy? Is it totally regulatory?
That's part of it. Obviously, you've got the regulatory issues. You've got tax issues. If people are doing business without going through where sales tax might be applied, or hotel tax or other taxes, that can have an impact on the economy. Then you've obviously got businesses who have been in the city, who've been doing business in the city for a long time and invested money in that city, who face being disrupted. So there's a lot of questions, but yes, the policy and regulations are a key one. The economic impact, there's a lot of opportunity for positive impact, but for a city that relies on a tax base, there's opportunity for negative impact that has to be discussed and considered. So to me, they're the three key areas.
Councilman Glover?
What effect has this had on the existing economy? For instance, you talked about banking. Are existing banking systems being used less? Or have banks closed? What impact on existing retail has happened?
Yeah, and I honestly couldn't give you data on the impact on the mainstream banking industry, but what I can say is that a lot of the people who are using these things are people that may not qualify to go to a bank. For example, if you're a home-based business that wants to create something, take it from being a home-based business to go commercial, you might not be in the place where whether you feel intimidated to go to the bank, whether you don't qualify financially to go to the bank. Instead, you can sell the public on your idea without having to go through that process. I know this week I just funded on Kickstarter a project from a father and two young daughters who he wanted to teach about entrepreneurship, and they created a new type of pooper scooper for their dog. Okay. And instead of it just being a home project, it's now a commercial project that's being sold in retail. They probably couldn't have got funding for that, but here they could, and there's thousands of those ideas happening every day.
I know existing retail uses online. You can buy from a lot of the major stores online and then pick it up from the store.
Yeah.
Did I see your hand up, Councilman Ford? No? Anyone else?
No, he has a flip phone, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Better than a brick.
Oh, yeah, maybe you can share that economy. I'm sure there are other old people out there who want to be able to share economy.
Watch it.
or
Watch it.
technology.
The mayor pro tem advised me that celebrities everywhere are going back to flip phones, so.
Little tighter world.
Councilwoman Marcus.
This kind of fits in with our next discussion about the National League of Cities,
good,
but
that's
one
right.
of the things I had on my notes was that Dallas is addressing the Uber and Lyft issues, and it's on their website, so they encouraged us to, did you help advise them? But, you know, it is something that cities around the country are looking at, so we did get a little bit of that at National League of Cities and some good tips, you know, from other cities on what they're doing, but it is a really, this was one of the major topics.
Yeah, and I would just, to add to that, that they're the things that are challenges of how you have to, respond to them. But also, I wouldn't overlook the opportunities of the economic development of things that aren't related to those at all. You have some great startups here in Kansas City, like Neighborly is one of them. People who are really tapping into this and making viable businesses, which are going out not just in Kansas City, but are starting to have a national impact. And the amount of money it can bring into the economy in a positive way. It's just a good investigation to have as well as the regulatory one.
But how to make sure that money comes into our city.
It's a great place for it to come.
But I mean, how do we make sure they're paying what they should be paying?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. You've got obviously two things of the economic development of funding a business or working with businesses to start here in Kansas City, to take advantage of the technology that's here in town, to actually knowing that there's a lot of money being pushed into those type of startups. How do you get them to be part of based in Kansas City and to bring the money here? Mm-hmm. And then there's a second one of how do you regulate what's happening? So it's a huge discussion, well beyond Airbnb or ride sharing.
Go ahead, Councilman Glover.
That brings up another question. Has staff looked at the ways this type of economy has impact on our own budget?
Well, no, because it's kind of hard to quantify at this point. We're still trying to figure out Lyft and Uber.
And we're also still trying to deal with the retail sales issue online.
Online?
Yeah.
The marketplace fairness.
A whole lot of places are. That legislation is
A national
unlike
conversation.
a national conversation and a statewide conversation, and neither of which are likely to change in the next year or so. Okay, anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem.
One thing, I mean, we're seeing the end product being sold online or through that process, but the tangible pieces to put that product together are more likely being bought from, a regular source as they produce it. I mean, so it's almost a merging of both worlds going forward. And the other is whenever we're faced with these kind of challenges as a society, is we can't just continue to think about it as we always have. It may be a completely new, different revenue source that funds governments. I don't know that. I don't have an idea of what that looks like. But we can't force ourselves to say we have to protect this at no cost without making sure we're opening our mind to any kind of possibility of how we fund giving basic services to the community that people are living in. So it's going to be a challenge, but it also can be a really creative exercise and a way for us as a city to continue to be on the forefront of the progressive movement of a place where people want to live. And I think when you're the place where people want to live, that's your tangible resource that's going to fuel the funding of your basic services. I think those cities that are going to fight this and try to stay the traditional model no matter what, because that's what we know, will get hurt the most. So I don't know the answers, as you don't know, but I think the presentation was to present it's here. We've got to think differently. We've got to, as we're putting budgets together and managing money, start keeping an eye on things and understand this world and what it is. And I don't know anybody, I don't know that somebody knows what it is. You know, if you would have said 5 years ago, or how about just when we were putting the Google application together, the people that went, yeah, and then dramatic in a short period of time, the dramatic change it's made for the city of Kansas City, in no way that any of us ever could even imagine what the conversation would be. So it's hard to plan, put processes around something that doesn't exist yet or you don't understand yet. But I think knowing that you're in this arena you're already half the battle of understanding that you're open to it, you're open to being nimble and moving in ways that you're not traditionally used to doing. So it's a lot of unknowns and with no answers, but here we are.
Oh, can I add, when
Sure, go
Cindy
ahead.
said something, and then one thing you said at the very beginning, when we're talking about stretching our budget or providing services, using that sharing mentality to, if you need codes or if you need your lawn mowed, and how can we provide services, matching people that are willing to provide services in their neighborhood with service needs, and as that type of budget stretching economy.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you, and thanks a lot. Very
Thank you.
enlightening.
Very enlightening, thank you.
Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.